The scripture passage that you are about to hear is one that you might have heard in the context of a memorial service if you've been to a few memorial services. It's a passage where Jesus is gathered with his disciples on the night before he was captured and tried and executed, and he assures them that he's going ahead of them to prepare a place for them and tells them that they know the way where he is going. And so when we hear this, it's often in the context of a life after death. And we can imagine that whatever that mystery holds, there is Jesus, the risen one, who is going to prepare a place for us. But I think that we can understand this passage in a broader context than just life after death. Whatever mystery that holds, there's also the mystery of the unknown future that is approaching us at every second. And already we can imagine that Jesus is there preparing a place for us and that we walk into that presence with trust. And so I'd like to invite you to hear now, listen as Fritz offers this word of hope.
John 14, 1-4. And Jesus said to his disciples, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house there are many dwelling places. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and will take you to myself, so that where I am, there you may be also. And you know the way to the place where I am going." Hear what the Spirit is saying to the church.
I received in seminary was from Flora Vollner, who was a United Church of Christ minister and author. And every year she taught a class on prayer and meditation. Flora at the time was probably in her early 60s, and she was ordinary in appearance in every way. Her dress code was more down to earth rather than fashion forward. But she had clear blue eyes and a face that could only be described as kind and a generous smile. Most classes in graduate school are between 8 and 20 students, at least in seminary, that's true. But the administration every year had to hunt to find a room that was large enough to house Flora's classes. Generally, 70 to 80 students would show up for her class, and she never wanted to turn anybody away. Why turn away a student who wants to explore prayer and the life of the soul, she would ask. Well, one day in the class, we were talking about difficult situations, whether that's dealing with a family conflict, or visiting someone who's recently been incarcerated, or walking into a home where a family is in mourning. Flora suggested that for her, it helps to visualize the presence of Christ already in the room. I go to prepare a place for you where I am, there you will be also, and you know the way to where I am going. Now, if I were beside Jesus when he said those words to his disciples, I think I'd be right in there with Thomas, who raised his hand and said, have you told us exactly where you're going? And do we know the way? Do you have a road map at least? The summer after Flora's class on prayer and meditation, I took CPE, Clinical and Pastoral Education, and joined 9 other students working as a chaplain in a large hospital. The main units in my care for most of the summer were the vascular surgery ward and cardiac ICU. I had just turned 30, and I was fortunate not to have ever spent a night in the hospital. And I was part of a family for whom death was an infrequent visitor. So this was a blessing, of course. But it meant that I had little life experience to draw from for the work of hospital chaplaincy. And no book learning can prepare you to push aside a curtain by a hospital bed, and meet a patient you don't know who had just had part of his leg amputated. No great theologian can give you the words to speak in a room thick with grief where a family has to decide if or when they take their loved one off life support. And I can tell you that after 27 years of ministry, I still walk into these zones with much trepidation. That summer, though, all these years ago, I felt mostly inadequate and awfully scared. So I went back to Flora's suggestion to visualize Jesus already in the room. I go before you, prepare a place for you. You know the way. And when I wanted to run away, that verse and that visualization gave me the courage to step into the room with all of my fumbling inadequacy and simply be with the person or the family in their struggle. And as we turn toward the uncertain future as a church, individually, we may feel inadequate. After all, how can we fully prepare for the unknown? Now, of course, there may be technical and tactical and strategic things we can learn, but spiritually, it helps to know that the risen one goes before us to prepare a place. It helps to visualize the friend, to use a favorite Sufi term for God, visualize the friend waiting in our tomorrow. And that allows us to take the next step even when blindfolded. That allows us to leap and dance even on the side of a cliff. And when it comes to the future of the church, I wonder if we can do the same. We may not know what it will look like, and so sometimes seeing the most creative church architecture helps us imagine that what happens inside may be beyond our usual expectations. If you enter a building like this, for example, you expect things to be a bit different. You hope to be surprised. Hymn books and rigid pews and bulletin covers with rainbows and butterflies might be a tad disappointing. If you saw a church like this, you might be a little let down if you encountered the same old, same old. I would hope for something different, a new approach, a new insight, a different way to open to God, something playful and challenging and true. People play with the architecture of church as a reminder that we don't have to be constrained by what has been, in dialogue with and connected to the past for sure, but there's room to be whimsical and creative and maybe even a little bit weird in the best sense of that term. As we've said all through this Weird Church series, we're using the word not at all in a pejorative sense, but as something desirable, delightful, and good. Weird as in a playful way of pointing to what is unique and authentically true. Weird as in freeing. The people of Portland, Oregon seem to understand this. For years, they've run with the slogan, "Keep Portland Weird." And so, yes, as you see that image, that is a guy in a kilt riding a unicycle, playing the bagpipes with flames flaring behind him. Okay, now that's a little weird, but can you get any more unique than that? And how delightful. A city that's defined by strip malls and chain stores, by McDonald's and Kentucky Fried Chicken, has totally, completely lost its weirdness. CBC is having a competition now on the best neighborhood in Vancouver. And I can assure you that no one wins because they have the best franchises and fast food restaurants. The top neighborhoods are loved because they're unique, welcoming, and delightful. They invite you to come in and take your time. How might we as a church, Highlands United and St. Andrews Wesley United and others connected online, How might we each be our unique self, wonderfully weird in our own way? Here are some ideas.
The church can't get weirder. The whole concept of it.
Oh, if this energy really went deep into the church could be worshiping all the time. And we wouldn't need church services because we'd be dancing and singing and we'd be welcoming our neighbor. And no matter who came into our city, town, neighborhood, house, we'd be excited and we'd see it as a celebration of God, and we'd do a jig and we'd sing a song and have joy unlimited.
I almost wish that we would spend a year where we would rename all of the disciples women's names and just kind of approach it from a more feminine, softer viewpoint, and just let go of some of the chains we have, and make a few mistakes, and have a few that fall flat, but just to it's to challenge the privilege of thinking that we've had for 2,000 years, and let's flounder a little bit, and in that floundering, just focus on what would it be like if the women were the editors of the Bible.
I'm open to the church embracing any type of weirdness they want. I think that trying new things is the only way to evolve. If we kept doing services like we did years and years ago, we wouldn't even let some type of people in the church thinking about like that with everything that's going on in the world. So whether it's a Zoom service and we actually see how many people attend and speak up, or things like that, whatever we need to do to keep people coming and keep new people interested and just being weird along the way, because we can't grow if we don't try.
Now with the live streaming and it being on YouTube, I can watch church and attend church whenever I want. And that's been so much of a blessing, especially during this COVID time, because when I'm having a day where I'm feeling down, that's the day that I go to church. And I might just scan through and listen to the sermon again, or I might just listen to the children's time, or there might have been a hymn that I want to listen to. And so that makes it appropriate, or makes it so that it doesn't seem so weird now. And I'm hoping that we can make it a little weirder and be able to do church on different days, doing different things. It doesn't necessarily have to be attached to the building. Maybe it's in nature. Maybe it's a walk and a discussion instead of a building and a sermon.
I think there's a lot of stories that people have about their lives that don't come up very often. And I love like when Spirit Singers get together and have our parties, and like you find out the most random things about people. I love that weirdness about the Spirit Singers, and I'd love to have more of that in the church.
I say let's go full weird. I'm all for it because it gets people engaged and passionate and talking, and I think that kind of engagement and community is exactly what the world needs more of right now.
Singing, dancing, out in the world, meeting people where they are, every act an act of worship, risking, fumbling, led by the vision of women or anyone who has been marginalized. That's the kind of weirdness that I think will set us free. The Old English word for weird is Weordan, and it simply means to become. Weordan. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but I suspect none of you is old enough to remember how a word was pronounced 800 years ago, so I'm just diving in. In the context of the church, then, the question becomes, how can we become free enough to fully embody the love of God? or at least more fully embody the love of God? How can we be so weird that we are so free to embody love? It sounds easy, but we know it ain't easy. The church's weird future means change. It's weird because it's different from what we already know. And change means that we need to let go what we expect is the right way to be church. And being open to change means that we're open to the unexpected, because we don't know what the future holds. We have no idea personally or for society as a whole or for the church what is going to happen next. But we know that it helps to turn towards the future in an open way and plant seeds of hope. And we know that we can take a few touchstones of faith into the future with us, the Bible as the collection of our stories, the cross that accompanies us into our deepest grief and our most profound hope, the light that goes before us always, the light of Christ. And we can visualize that Christ does go before us and prepares a place for us already there, inviting us to pull aside the curtain so that we can step into the unknown future, as wonderfully weird as that might be. By the grace of God, may we trust that this is so. Amen.